broadcasting at the Holland Building on Dixie State University campus. I'm Jennifer Kohler.
And I'm Eric Young. Welcome. We're glad to have you on this Wednesday morning, the 19th of October. And I'm time-stamping this again because of the progressing, well, I can't really call it the progress of the election process, but it's still going on. And so
you don't like the word progressive?
I will, not in terms of what's going on with our democratic process at this point. But nonetheless, it's important for you to know when we are doing this show, so it's relevant or it's in context to what's going on.
Right.
In addition to that, let's see. The views and opinions expressed by myself and Jennifer don't necessarily reflect those of Dixie State University or the communication department or the community education channel. Now that I've got all that out, and we're coming to you live on Facebook too, which I'm pretty excited about, as well as being live on YouTube. So this hopefully is to encourage you to chime in the comments section at the bottom of the live feed, and I'll be monitoring that so we have an idea of what's being said and we can respond a little bit more in time with you, our audience, on what we're going to be talking about today.
Right, and you could fact check us live too.
You can.
Like when you see us say something erroneous, you can just type it right into the Facebook comment, and then we'll read it, and then we'll figure out what we did wrong.
Well, hopefully, because it's just you and me up here going through and doing that to see what's going on. Anyway, let's see. Today at noon, I should mention that is the St. George Chamber of Commerce is hosting the County Commissioner debate. That's happening with Greg Aldred, Dean Cox, and Josh Warburton, the three candidates for County Commission. That's today at noon at the Hilton Garden Inn over by the Dixie Convention Center. It's for Chamber of Commerce, and I think in terms of their luncheon, they have to pay for the lunch and go, but I think it's open for general public as well. I can't imagine it not being. If it's not, go and crash the party anyway and listen to the debate, see what's going on. You're going to go to that?
Yes, I'm planning on going today. I'll probably not go for the lunch because I didn't reserve a spot, but I will be there at noon to listen to the three candidates for commissioner. And I will say that I did a little short survey yesterday asking people what in your opinion is the main issue. If you could pick one issue for Washington County, what do you think the most important issue is? I had the people I talked to, I would say maybe 40% had an opinion and the other 60 didn't really have anything off the top of their heads, but the 40% said we think it's traffic flow in town. And then I said, now my follow-up question is, can you tell me the names of the three candidates for county commissioner? And none of the people that I interviewed could give me those three names.
And these individuals are students here at Dixie State?
And some adults too, not younger students, but yeah, on the campus.
You qualified then that they were all Washington County residents.
Right, I did ask them. So that kind of brings us up to the question of being an informed voter. We've been talking about what makes a good voter. And based on a book I'm reading, Democracy for Realists, and then firsthand experience, I'm beginning to think that the idea of an informed voter could be a myth.
Give me a little background. We've talked a little bit about this in terms of kind of a pre-test you put out to certain students in certain classes with certain questions. What's been your response?
Well, yeah, it's
almost like Leno's Man on the Street asking questions.
It is a little bit. It is a little bit, and I will say that in my Voice and Civility course, I have a mixture of mostly younger college-age students, but half of my students in any given semester cannot name the name of the president, the vice president of the United States. So that's alarming, and they hardly ever know the names of their senators or representatives. So again, it's one of my big issues. They can tell you the stats on the NFL league and university sports. They can tell you about popular music and shows and performers. And I see some of our staff here behind the cameras kind of smiling a little bit. Yeah, okay, I get what you're saying. So, back to what makes a good voter. And then, Eric, I want to ask you something. You made a very provocative statement last week. You said, I think I'm not going to vote.
Not only am I not going to vote, I said don't vote. I put that out perhaps as an alternative to our audience. Before we go there, though, I want to step back a little bit into terms of what does it mean to be informed? And we're noticing that we don't have all that much of an informed populace to go through and maybe make an an informed choice when it comes to doing that on the 8th of November.
Okay.
Why are we derelict in not understanding what's going on?
Well, I think partly we would be derelict in the sense that we are busy people, and it's not, and we're used to having information crammed down our throats and flooded into our brains. So when we have to go seeking information specifically, so to that point of being informed, I did go to the Utah.gov, the Utah Vote site.
Right.
And I
By the way,
highly
there's
recommend
a
that.
link to that on our Facebook page
Good.
as well that goes through all the candidates and propositions and even the judges
Yeah.
there for you to take a look at. You can click on the link, download it, or just read it right there off
Right.
their website.
So when you get into the voting booth or do your early voting, however you're going
You
to
have
do
an
it,
idea
yes, you will
what's
have
going on.
some, the initiatives are in there, the judges, like you mentioned, and information about important things. So it's not that hard to get informed on some of the basics.
It's not.
No, it isn't. But we have to make an effort, rather than having it all flooded and delivered to us without even any effort on our part.
A few years ago, Wired magazine declared that the web is dead because we don't just go to it anymore for information. It comes to us and makes it obviously some kind of an exchange that way. And so we've become used to the idea of perhaps having information fed to us, and especially if it's following certain algorithms that surround us within our social media. Facebook's going to feed you what they feel you want to know. We talked about this on our last show, and you were talking about how when you Google searched the gubernatorial race, it was just Herbert that came up. There was no Mike Weinholz, okay?
Yes, yeah.
If I searched the same on mine, I'm sure Mike Weinholz would come up and not
Okay. Not just
Herbert,
Herbert.
okay, because
Yeah.
of our political leanings and
Okay.
our political affiliations. And
Okay.
social media knows all that, all right?
Okay.
So another part that's dysfunctional in terms of us becoming more informed is that we have huge algorithms that are out there feeding us what we want to know and not what makes us more diverse, perhaps, in understanding what's happening politically. On top of that, listen to any news program, and the top of the news program, they're going to lead with Donald Trump. And he's effectively gone through and inserted himself in the top position of any news feed. And I don't care which way that feed's going, Donald Trump's going to lead the story for the most part, unless something more horrendous happens.
Right, because
today,
his philosophy is there's no such thing as bad press coverage for him.
for him, right, yeah, and that's why he's
Right.
engaged in that.
Right.
And we have media who obviously are feeding into that and picking up on that. So that kind of redundancy, the Trump thing over and over and over and over again, who wants to, I'm exhausted, really,
Well, and I
listening.
feel badly for you because you have to spend more time on social media than a lot of people do. And I do think it's it's damaging to your soul at a certain point. And I recommend that you,
Are you saying I've got a damaged soul?
I recommend that you see if you can't minimize your exposure to that a little bit.
I wish I could,
Yeah, yeah.
but I teach social media here
Yeah.
at Dixie State University, so I,
Can't you teach how to do social media without suffering brain damage?
well, I'm trying to.
Are you okay?
Now you're accusing me of having brain damage as well. Is that because I said not to vote? I'm abstaining?
Well, it's a pretty.
You think that's brain damage? That's soul damage happening to me?
I think you might be a little more cynical than me.
Well, I believe
But
that
then
cynicism actually is
yeah.
a virtue.
Yes. Okay, cynicism or skepticism?
Skepticism. Okay,
Yes.
thanks for the correction there.
Yes, because
But I do-
actually I want to be more skeptical like you.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, that's Ruiz's fifth agreement, actually, is
Okay.
to be skeptical that way. Which is something I like to talk about the
Okay.
4 agreements here on the show,
Okay.
and maybe how that educates us into being a better voter as well.
right.
But you don't want to go there. You want to go through and talk about
Yeah.
why I'm not voting.
Yeah, I just
and
think,
as that progresses
I think
through,
it's important to explore that a little bit because, like I said, I don't think you're the only person out there that's feeling this way. So let's talk a little bit about that.
well, you called me last time. You called me
Yeah.
irresponsible, kind of a roundabout way, but you still called me irresponsible. That I'm,
Okay.
not holding up to my duty as an American citizen
Okay.
and going through and participating with that. And at the risk of beating a dead horse, and I really don't want to go back to this, but
Okay.
I will state that
Okay.
I, in good conscience, can't contribute to a process that I feel is fundamentally broken.
Okay. Okay.
However, I still am aware. I believe I am an informed voter. I try to go through and flesh out both sides of any issue right down the ballot. I know who's running. I know what the platforms are. I got better educated with Evan McMullen, actually, as well, as did you.
Yeah, now didn't that sort of spark a little hope in you, possibly?
Yeah, yes, yeah, and no.
Yes and no.
I like Evan McMullen a
Yeah.
lot, and I wish he had thrown his hat in the ring earlier. I wish things had come about with a little bit more oomph behind him in terms of some political collateral. And I'm just afraid that he's too late. And while he certainly has his persuasive sway in the state of Utah, and I'm heartened to see that, it's not enough. It won't be enough. It might swing Utah. It might swing Arizona, maybe Idaho. I'm not sure because of, again, the Latter-day Saint population density in those three areas, those three voting states.
Well, I know you are aware, like a lot of people are probably, that, you know, there's a remote possibility that if the other two candidates did not get their required 270 electoral college
It's pretty
votes,
remote,
right?
though.
That there would be 3 candidates to pick from for the House of Representatives, right?
Oh, okay. So you're saying that if the electoral college fails,
Right.
then in determining a majority
Right.
vote for what's going on in terms of the
Yeah.
candidates concerned, then it defaults to the top 3 candidates. And Evan McMullen, because of his numbers, is now considered to be at that level.
Probably number 3, which
Why
is,
aren't we seeing him in the debate tonight?
well, because he doesn't have the required 15%.
That's my point.
Yes, but nevertheless, see, the debate is not what it used to be as far well, you know, right? Okay, you're laughing, and I get that, but it's also not as important as it used to be for getting your message out because of your beloved social media and other ways.
No. You can't hang that on me. And that my beloved social media. That's
You're an addict.
Because of no, I'm not. I'm looking forward to cutting the cable here
Are you?
when I retire. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, but I will say that because he is not as dependent, or because things have changed in the world of media now, in the world of information, that's a possibility. And what he needs is some endorsements from some people who have some influence, and that would make a huge
No,
difference.
let's not go there.
Okay.
Please, let's not go there.
All right. So we talked about you, and you know, when we were talking about planning for a little bit, what we wanted to go to today, and I remember you said, one of us said, uninformed voters are likely to vote, but the more informed you are, possibly the less
likely you are to vote?
likely you are to
Do you
vote.
think that's the case? Do you think that's the case? So
Yeah.
the more informed you are, the less likely you are to vote. I'm going to ask you to comment on that on our Facebook page.
Yeah.
I'll go through and see what's coming up with
Yeah.
that. That's certainly what got me to this point.
Okay.
For me, though, it was a certain documentary that was a turning point for me.
Really?
Yeah, it was. It's the documentary's called 13th. It's about the 13th Amendment, and not just the incarceration levels of black men in the United States, but the politics and the commercial interest behind that.
Well, what I remember from watching it, because you asked me to, was that black males make up about 6% of the U.S. population. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right.
And but 40%
40% of the prison
population, which is a huge.
1 in 3 black males will be incarcerated. 1 in 3, where 1 in 17 white males will be incarcerated at our current levels of arrests and convictions.
Okay.
What's going on?
Right. And you're saying the 13th Amendment, the way it was written, there is a loophole.
Well, I'm not saying that. The documentary says that.
Okay,
I
and you agree,
with that.
and we both were talking, we were saying it might not be an intentional loophole.
So the amendment gets into emancipation, the freedom of slaves. The caveat being, if they commit a crime, if they are a criminal, then they still lose those rights to what's going on.
Freedom, okay.
And the documentary goes through and asserts with some pretty powerful evidence, not just anecdotal, as it looks at the criminalization of black. And then it takes it to a level of what's going on with that in terms of the, I don't know what to call it, it's not a political action committee, the ALEC, the American
Legislative something council.
I can't remember what's,
Yes.
that's terrible of me.
Yeah.
Take a look at the documentary if you get a chance. It's on Netflix. You could stream it and see for yourself what's going on. My point being, after everything that I have examined and taught within my social media class and other classes that I teach here, this was the last straw, so to speak,
Really?
that got me to think that I can't participate with this anymore.
Okay, so
At
back,
least not for this election
back to
cycle.
your protest of not, your action you're taking by not voting, then, and again, I don't think you're the only person feeling discouraged by some of the obstacles and challenges we have in our system. So what other ideas do you have as a regular citizen for making some changes to the system? Like what other ideas can a person pursue besides this protest of non-vote?
Well, the number one change that needs to happen, and I'm just going to make our producers aware, we're no longer live on Facebook, at least according to my feed, if we can go through and wrangle that back around again. I think the number one change that needs to happen is that we go back to journalistic principles in terms of the Fourth Estate.
Okay.
That we get away from sensationalizing what's happening in terms of anything, that we stop finding what maybe that partisan approach might be in terms of any given story, and become more united in terms of just telling what the truth about a matter is. Now, as an American populace with the internet, we have direct access to things like the congressional record and the White House and other ways to go through and get information literally from the horse's mouth. Maybe weaning ourselves away from any type of media that's going through and framing or interpreting what those ideas might be. So I think the first step is we need to have some type of reform within the Fourth Estate, that we get back to the integrity of journalism and what established that as a watchdog. It's called the Fourth Estate for a reason, and it is constitutionally not legalized, but constitutionally allowable for us to have that ability in terms of a free press to go through and be that watchdog for the nation. We don't have that anymore.
Well, for example, that brings up a case that was just resolved, I believe, Monday. Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! Went to the protest on the pipeline that's going through the South Dakota Sioux Reservation.
Yep.
And she was arrested earlier this year for documenting as a journalist, and she had credentials documenting these protests and the violence perpetrated on the protesters. And so she was put under arrest and ordered to come and appear before the magistrate, and she did turn herself in on Monday, and of course that case was dismissed, as it should be.
Well,
but it
there
was
was a secondary charge introduced her. Let me have you move forward just a little bit, just to pull that sun shadow off of you. There we go. Okay,
right.
Is that better? So she was initially charged for trespassing, and then the prosecutor in the area wanted to go through and this is probably an accurate use of the verb, trump up the charge to inciting a riot.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Because there was some heavy equipment that was damaged, that was set on fire, millions of dollars of damage happening within that, and they wanted to hang that on Amy.
Okay.
Now you have to understand that Democracy Now! Is also a very left-leaning portal when it comes to feeding information.
Should they
out
be
there, so.
less left-leaning in your reform of the Fourth Estate, in your opinion?
Yes, I would have to advocate for that. Even though I might be left-leaning myself, I still have to go through and say, we need to pull out bias or implicit bias out of...
Why can't we just admit it up front and then just say it the way we see it, based on our own filters and biases, and let people be smart enough to say, well, that's your opinion, right? Or I want to hear a persuasive point of view.
Because I think we want to, I don't know why I'm using third person on this, but we want to go through and portray ourselves as journalists instead of as opinion makers.
Right.
And there's a huge difference.
So when you put the journalist hat on, you're required ethically to stop expressing your own point of view.
If I were a sports journalist and I happen to be covering the Oregon-Utah game, and if I go through, and even within my inflections, the paralinguistics, the way I say things, that shows any favoritism to either Utah or Oregon, I will lose my job. Because it's my job to report what's happening on the field, not to lend any sense of bias or favoritism to Oregon or to Utah. Now, fortunately, I'm not a sports journalist, so go Ducks, right?
Go Ducks. You didn't go to the U like I did.
I did not go to the U like you did. I went to a different you, but that's a subject for another show.
Okay. All right.
My daughter is going to Oregon.
Oh,
so
she is.
I'm a big
Okay.
Ducks
Now you're
fan.
going to be a Duck fan. Okay.
I have to be. They've got all my money.
All
so.
right. Yes, they do. Okay, so we were exploring this idea then of what to do if you feel like our system doesn't work as well as it needs to. What ideas are there for reforming it?
Well, I gave you one.
Okay,
What
the one
ideas do you
idea
have?
for the meeting. Well, one idea that I have is I know there's, my big thing is campaign finance reform and term limits. So I think
Donald Trump, the Donald, just came out yesterday
So
endorsing term limits.
I am so happy to give him a point for something, okay? He gets a point for that, for sure.
But he's so negative on points. Does that do anything?
Well, not substantially yet. Okay.
All right.
But so I think they go hand in hand, and I think the best
You think
way
that reform and term limits go
hand in hand.
Okay.
Yes, campaign finance reform. So what I think, there's a movement for a constitutional amendment. So we'd have to get 3/4 of the state legislatures, right, to ratify this proposed amendment on term limits and campaign finance reform. So I'm thinking
6-year terms for senators, and is that right?
two-year for
and 2
representatives.
years for representatives.
Yeah, and maybe that would be altered. Maybe it would, who knows, you know, in the final analysis. But the point being that, so I'm thinking, well, let's see, we have Don Ipson and Dorothy Engelman running for state senate from our district. We have Lowry Snow and Brad Last and John Stainer and who am I forgetting as in the House. So I would like to know, when I have a chance to speak to some of these people, what is your commitment? As a state legislator, would you support a vote for a constitutional amendment for U.S. term limits and campaign finance reform?
That's a valid question. I think I'd go more, what's your exit strategy as well? You know, in a day and age of entrepreneurial development and apps and that kind of thing, the first thing any angel investor or VC will ask you is, what's your exit strategy? How do you plan on getting out of this deal? Right? Well, why don't we hold our own politicians to that?
Oh, and the revolving door between government and lobbyists and institutions, right, that are lobbying a lot. You know, we need to like work on that lobbying, that revolving door too.
Think?
Yes. So that would be in my ultimate constitutional amendment. We would
So
really.
you throw that, you package that whole revolving door under term limits.
Well, and there's obviously, and you know, also the staffs. I hate to say this, but the people who staff in Washington D.C. for the elected officials, they are very subject to the revolving door manipulation.
Not just the staff, the consultants, the third parties that are out there.
Right.
Aside from the big money, consulting firms are where some of the biggest money in D.C. is invested.
Yeah, and Jack Abramoff said, the way I get control of a senator or a representative's office, he said, I get with their chief of staff, their upper management, and I say to them, you know, when you're finished working here on the Hill, how about maybe come and work for me for 3 times more than you're making right now? And he said,
after the book deal.
He said, the minute I say that, they're mine. They're mine. I own them. So that's pernicious, and that.
So how do you break up that network?
Well, so
we're talking about nuking the whole Hill. Don't take me literally on that.
Thank you, because you're not an advocate of violence.
I'm not an advocate of violence.
You're not.
But what we're talking about is really emptying the offices, not just in the Senate chambers, not just in the House or up on the offices on the Hill, but we're talking about eliminating any kind of influence on DC's level.
Yes, we are. And you know, we need to look back. We need to also pull back to the state level. We need to pull back to the local level as well and see where undue influence has the tendency to corrupt good people.
Geez, Jen. So far we've talked about reforming journalism.
Media,
We've talked about
journalism.
media in that respect. I'm going to say journalism, because there are outlets out there that aren't, who purport to be journalists who aren't journalists in that respect. And then term limits, which has been, this isn't new by any stretch of the imagination. People have been lobbying this for as long as I have been involved.
But maybe there's a critical mass building. That's what I'm hoping, is that finally.
Okay, so
you know,
that critical mass seems to be articulated by Donald Trump, who says,
yes, that's his
the
appeal.
election now is rigged.
Right, that's his appeal, is people who are fed up with the status quo.
What does that do to the process?
what does what do? The idea, the claim that it's all rigged.
Putting out the claim that it's rigged, and that if he
Well-
loses, it's rigged.
Well, it depends. I mean, some people will react in different ways than others, but some people might take that as license to take the law into their own hands.
We've seen this
Yeah.
on a number of
Yeah.
levels in a number of republics across the planet,
Yeah.
where when the election process, when the democracy fails, the people go into revolt.
In the streets and et cetera, possibly.
And we're already
Yes.
hearing about militias being put together
Yes.
Across the United States,
Well,
and polling
yeah.
places now are
Yeah.
heightening. They're being trained on engaging active shooters, that kind of thing. It's, this isn't my dad's America anymore.
Well, you're kind of making it sound like it used to be great, and it's not. And I think we both agree it's about the same amount of great as it's always been.
About the same amount of great.
Yes, same amount of great, only great in different ways maybe. But yeah, I don't think we're...
Is it nothing new? Do we have the same kind of chat as we're 4 years ago or 8 years ago?
The only
were
thing-
these the same kinds of issues that we were talking?
Yes.
Certainly, we're talking about term limits.
Same kind of
We
issues.
were talking about media bias.
Yes, same kind of issues, but see, the point is when the population is tired of it, there's a point where people will just say, I'm not going to buy into this anymore. I'm not going to support this anymore. You're an example
And
of
that's
that.
what I'm saying.
And that's why Trump, has done as well as he has, because people are sick of the status quo. A lot sick of it. And so coming back around to what our choices are, that's one reason why I'm super excited about Evan McMullin as a possibility. Because to me, he's a clear vote for, I'm not going to be forced to vote for one evil over another evil, frankly, or one candidate I can't support over another candidate I can't support. Now, finally, because of really what it is to be in America, some guy from nowhere, basically. I mean, sure, he's worked on the Hill. He has experience in the CIA. He has experience on Wall Street with Goldman Sachs.
And he's got a pretty solid vice presidential running mate.
Mindy Finn.
Finn is her last name.
And have
Mindy
you
Finn.
been able to find out much about her?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
In terms of her, she's, I think she's a great role model for, and this, I hesitate to even say this, but she seems to be a great role model for feminists
Okay.
in that respect.
Okay.
I think she brings some balance to perhaps Evan's more right
Okay.
leaning.
She might be a little more liberal
They
in
seem
some
like
ways.
a solid team. I think it's
Yeah.
an interesting choice
Yeah.
for Evan McMullin to go through and
Yes.
get her in there.
Well, I was excited to learn about his platform, that one of his issues that is near and dear to my heart is poverty in the
poverty.
United States, and
He's got an interesting approach to
he
that.
does.
What
and
is that?
so, well, he was talking about one idea would be the minimum wage. If a person is at a low wage, maybe $9 an hour, below what's considered, the poverty level, that the government would actually supplement hours worked with an additional increase to the wage. So
He's talking about
yeah.
a federal
Yeah.
subsidy
Yes.
for minimum wage workers below a certain poverty line to bring
Yes.
them up to about
Yes.
a $15 an hour
Yes.
working wage.
So employers that are worried about being put out of business by this burden are not worried. And think of all the extra money people will have to spend if
but
they're
isn't
earning more.
that inherently a liberal idea?
Somebody would say so. And you know what? You're
Yeah,
not
we're out
watching
of
the
time.
clock.
No, we have. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I know
Well,
how to read this now, and I know
I'm glad
we
you
have
figured
less
that
than
out.
a minute.
It's a digital
Okay.
clock. It's not analog.
Yes.
You can't figure that out.
All right.
We're boiling down to 30 seconds as we
Yeah.
go. You've been listening to us banter back and forth on
Yes.
Talking Point Live. If you have something to say about today's show, please leave a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/TalkingPointLive, and we'll be sure to go through and respond to that. I'm Eric Young with my good friend and colleague.
Jennifer Kohler.
We'll see you next Wednesday at 9 o'clock live.